Hello, boys and girls. It's Miss Gorka speaking, and welcome to Reader's Workshop today. It's Monday morning, a beautiful day to learn, so let's get started. Today we're going to talk about point of view and perspective. A little different than power and perspective. We are going to look at the differences between point of view and perspective. They are two different things. So today we're going to take a look deep into that and focus mostly on point of view once we're able to tell the difference between the point of view and the perspective of characters in the story. In this slide, I'm going to take a deep dive into point of view versus perspective, and we're going to take a look at what each one is and be able to decide the difference between the two. Okay, let's start off with point of view. Let's take a look here. Point of view gives the reader an idea of who is telling the story. Here, we're not talking about opinion or feelings. We're talking about how do we know who is telling the story? Is it the narrator? Is it a specific character? Who is telling the story that we're reading? Whereas perspective gives the reader an idea of what a character is thinking, what they are feeling, and how they are feeling. This is what we've studied a lot during this unit. Perspective. How does the character feel about a certain topic that's going on in the story? Perspective, we also talked about changes a lot from the beginning to the end of the story, right? A lot of the questions we've asked you with perspective is, how does the character's perspective change from the beginning to the end? And then you provide us with an answer and some details about how their feelings changed. Point of view is different. Point of view is who is talking, who is telling the story. And here are some examples of ways we can identify point of view. Here are the words: I, me, my, mine, we, he, she, they, them. When we're looking at point of view, we are taking a look and we're kind of putting binoculars on and searching for these words. When we see these words, we know that a point of view is either first person or third person, and then we know who is telling the story. I'll get more into that on the next slide. Here are some examples. Here are some examples of perspective. Sentences like, when my mom told me I was getting my own iPad, I smiled, jumped out of bed, grabbed my MTA card, and headed for the bus stop. When someone asks me, what is the perspective of this little girl or boy in this example? I might say, this perspective of this little girl or boy in this story is that she is so excited to get a new iPad, and she thinks this is a really good thing. I know this because she's smiling, she's hopping out of bed, she immediately runs out the door and waits for the bus to get to the store. So perspective is what they're thinking and how they're feeling, and point of view is who is telling the story. Let's take a look more and explore point of view on the next slide. Here we're going to talk about point of view only, and I learned this new trick. So let's see if this works. Yay! We're going to talk about point of view only. So we already know in here in the black area what the perspective is, the grayed out area. So we're going to really focus on figuring out how to identify the point of view. Is it first person or is it third person, and how do we know? So let's lower this shade here and talk a little bit more. Let's X out the shade. And talk a little bit more about first person point of view and third person point of view. With first person, you're talking a lot about I, me, and my. One moment, I'm going to get my magic pen. This is so exciting. I'm going to draw a circle around this. Oh boy. Okay. So first person talks a lot about I, me, my, mine. Usually, when we're talking about first person, you're able to get inside one of the characters' heads and know what they're thinking and feeling. So a lot of times, and we talked about this in my classroom, I'm sure in the other fourth grade classrooms as well, when something is written in first person, we are then able to identify and get the perspective, meaning we know who is speaking, therefore we know how they're feeling. When we're looking at first person and you see I, me, my, or mine, you know who is talking. Let's look at this example. I am so excited, I hop off the bus and into the iPad store. My eyes glance over at a shiny new device, and I just knew it would be mine. So I'm going to underline the words that I know make this first person. I see the word I. Oh, that is not an underline. I see the word I again. I see the word my. I see the word I again. And I see the word mine. So I know this story is told in first person point of view. That means that I know how this person feels about getting an iPad. Clearly, this little girl or boy is very excited, happy. It's a positive day. It's an exciting day. Having an iPad is the best. Okay? Now, let's move on to the third person. Should I even try my magic wand? I don't think you guys need my magic wand. Let's try it. Boop. Yay! Okay. So when we're focusing on the third person, we're talking about somebody else aside from who is telling the story. A character that is not telling us the story. Words that we know tell us that it's third person are names of characters, he, she, they, and them. So let's take a look now at an example of what third person looks like. She swung the door open and hopped into the iPad store. Her eyes widened as she spotted the one she wanted. She knew that iPad would be hers. All right, so let's underline and take a look at the ways I know this story is told in third person. So we're looking at the word she, her, she, hers. This means that someone else is telling the story. In this yellow box, first person, the girl who is getting the iPad, right? She is telling the story. In this version of the story, the girl who is getting the iPad is not telling the story. Somebody else is. So we look for names of characters and then the words he, she, they, them. For example, in Tiger Rising, they used the names of the characters a lot, like Sistine. That means third person. But when they used I, they're talking about whoever is talking. Let's get some practice because this might seem a little confusing to some of you. We'll practice and you'll know exactly what we're talking about. Let's give it a try. Let's see if we can figure out if this is first or third person. The three wishes. A poor woodcutter went to the forest to cut wood. He was about to cut an oak tree when a fairy appeared and begged him to spare the tree, to not cut the tree down. The woodcutter was a kind man and did not cut the tree, and the grateful fairy granted him 3 wishes. When he reached home, he was hungry. He remembered the fairy and wished for black pudding. At once, he saw a bowl of the finest black pudding in front of him. The woodcutter told his wife about the fairy, but she did not believe him. To test the next wish, The woodcutter wished that the pudding would stick on her nose. Suddenly, the pudding stuck his wife's nose. They tried hard to pull it off, but it stuck hard. The woodcutter asked her, "Would you rather be a queen with pudding stuck to your nose, or a poor woodcutter's wife?" She wished for the pudding to be off her nose. So, though they had the finest pudding for dinner, they had used up all the wishes and remained poor for the rest of their lives. Now, the point of this silly story is to figure out if this is first or third person. So I have done this one already, and I see that there are words like he. I see the word woodcutter. I'm kind of using the words woodcutter and wife as the name of the characters. So the woodcutter, his wife, the word his. So this looks like it's third person to me. There's the word he, she. Let's see. There we go. Point of view, first person. And how do I know? I see the words he, him, they, she. I see woodcutter and I see wife. Okay? Boys and girls, that was the silliest thing. I wrote first person, but it's third person because I see the words he, him, they, she, woodcutter, and wife. We already know from earlier in the slides that first person means I, me, mine, we, right? So we have to, I, me, and my. Third person is he, him, they, she, woodcutter, and wife. Let's go to the next slide to figure out what you're going to do on your own to practice first and third person point of view. So in your portfolio, you are going to read this text. It's very short. And keep point of view in your mind, meaning first and third person, and you're going to answer the questions in the portfolio assignment. I'm going to read to you the alarm clock story, and then you are going to answer these questions. Alarm clock. Ding, ding, ding. My alarm clock woke me up from a deep sleep, and I jumped out of bed so quickly that I frightened the dog. As I let the dog out, I noticed that nobody else was up. Silly me, it was Saturday. Here are the questions you are going to answer in complete sentences. Number 1. What is the difference between point of view and perspective? Remember, boys and girls, you can always go back to our T-chart here that helps you understand the difference between point of view and perspective. Use that to help you answer that question. Number 2, in alarm clock, is the point of view first person or third person, and how do you know? So your response might look something like this. Woohoo! It might look something like, for number 2, your answer might look like this. In alarm clock, the point of view is, and then you're going to name it. I know this because I see the words, and then you name them. Okay? It's pretty simple, but if you need help or you're stuck, you can go through any of the other slides to help you answer the question, and you can pause this video at any point to help you with that. So when you're done with this video now, I would suggest you head over to the portfolio and begin. Have fun!